My research focuses on the experiences of men in the Merseyside region during the Second World War. It explores how they engaged with green and blue spaces and focuses more generally on the impact of the natural environment on their well-being and resilience. My research is important for a number of reasons. Whilst historians have long given focus to morale on the home front, they have very rarely connected this to the wider environment. My research, therefore, breaks new ground in understanding the impact of landscapes on wartime experiences. Its significance, however, is not just in the way it sheds new light on the Second World War experience, but also that it provides a case study for rethinking the connections between landscapes and well-being. This talk explores two specific examples of the ways in which Merseyside men engaged with natural spaces during the Second World War: cycling and day trips. At first glance, these activities might appear to be merely forms of leisure and entertainment that on their own help to keep morale strong. However, as this talk will demonstrate, the crucial consideration is that these activities all took place not in the urban environment, but in open, green spaces. In this setting, the agentic qualities of natural spaces enabled men to release stress and build resilience. What is crucial about the Merseyside case study is that, as the city was heavily bombed, the natural environment took on a new role for the well-being of male workers. During the Second World War, Liverpool's strategic importance made it a major target for enemy air raids. As a result, the Merseyside region experienced some of the heaviest bombing raids outside of London. The Merseyside area also included a number of natural spaces, such as coastal areas and countryside, as well as green spaces and parks. In addition, its residents had relatively easy access to other natural spaces, such as North Wales, Cheshire, and Lancashire. For the purposes of my study, Merseyside includes the county boroughs of Liverpool, Bootle, Birkenhead and Wallasey. This slide shows other areas also included in Merseyside, with the map detailing Liverpool's material expansion in 1934. During the interwar period, and particularly during the 1930s, the outdoor recreation movement experienced a rapid growth. It focused on the physical and mental health benefits of engaging with recreation in the countryside. Activities which became popular during this period were hiking, rambling, walking, cycling, climbing, and camping. In Merseyside, this was evident in the growth of a number of groups, including the Liverpool Ramblers Association, the Liverpool branch of the YMCA, and cycling groups such as the Anfield Cycling Club and the East Liverpool Wheelers. During the war years, a far greater number of men than is usually realised remained on the Merseyside home front. Indeed, even by 1945, when army numbers were highest, 2/3 of men remained on the British home front. Some were older men, however many were of working age and may have been involved in reserved occupations. Men on the home front may also have been involved in civil defence duties. They were exposed to numerous stresses, and so building resilience and managing stress was essential for them. Here, we take a brief look at two of the ways these men engaged with green and blue spaces to manage their well-being. Cycling was popular in Merseyside during the interwar period, and the region had a number of cycling clubs. Throughout the war years, local newspapers ran regular listings of local cycling club runs. In May 1940, for instance, local clubs had runs scheduled to destinations including Llangollen, Chester and Snowdonia. One of the most well-known local cycling clubs was the Anfield Cycling Club, known as the Anfielders. Formed in 1879, the club became known for its long-distance riding, and its members met year-round for tours together. The club's members were male, and ranged in age from late teens to 40s, with many older members choosing to remain involved in the club in some capacity. This highlights how engagement with natural spaces via leisure pursuits was also important for developing and maintaining social connections which were beneficial to the well-being of these men. As war began in 1939, there were disruptions to the club in the form of members leaving the area or being less available due to war work. Petrol rationing, disruption to travel, and blackouts also had an impact on the club's activities. However, the importance placed by club members on engaging in this outdoor activity can be seen in the fact that they continued their runs despite these difficulties. The significance of this can be appreciated when we consider the considerable stresses and commitments these men experienced. Bombing raids on Merseyside began in 1940, causing uncertainty and fear. Those doing war work worked extended hours, and many men had civil defence responsibilities. For example, in 1942, a club run with meal to Alderley Edge was cut short. Alas, the calls of civil defence were paramount, and the party broke up before 8, the ride home proving uneventful in spite of the darkness. Also, in 1942, another member wrote of his joining a club run for the first time in a while due to his civil defence commitments with the Bobbies. Here we see the importance of these lighter moments where the men engaged with natural spaces and landscapes to build resilience during the stresses of war. The draw of engaging with the natural environment was strong, and club members ventured out even during the winter months. For example, in December 1939, just 3 months after war was declared, there was a run out to Knowles Green. Climatic conditions were not too favourable, snow on the roads and a leaden sky, but the wintry landscape with its frost-covered trees and the snow covering all the hedgerows had its charm, and it was well worthwhile venturing forth. Indeed, the agentic qualities of the natural landscapes are referenced frequently by club members. In January 1942, for instance, the impact of the weather and the landscape is evident again. Road round Highley and Appleton, over lanes white with frost, with clear, invigorating atmosphere and soft sunshine, the country looking fine. The enjoyment of engaging with these natural landscapes, despite the ongoing difficulties of war, can also be seen in 1942 on a ride out towards Chester. Eaton Park is always worth a few miles, if only for the trees. With some members away due to war service, the group went to considerable effort to maintain their important social ties. Interestingly, they often did this via shared memories of enjoying the natural spaces together. For example, in a letter home to his club friends in January 1941, club member Eric, who was serving overseas, wrote, "My favourite pastime is thinking of all the rides and tours we have had together with the ABC, and one of the things I look forward to is the resumption of the same old round of races, tours and Saturdays, especially Hale Wood." The local press at the time encouraged engagement with cycling to maintain well-being. For example, in January 1941, an article encourages even those with little time to spare to continue with their cycling. Even a short run, evening or weekend, will not only provide recreation and rest, but will assist in retaining the degree of fitness necessary to carry on our daily tasks. Local clubs scheduled runs to areas such as North Wales, Cheshire, Birkenhead and Lancashire. Another of the ways in which local men engaged with natural spaces for well-being can be seen in day trips. The Merseyside area had a number of green and blue spaces which could be accessed by its citizens. This access was, of course, impacted in a number of ways by the outbreak of war. For example, coastal defences prevented or limited access to local beaches, and some parks and recreational fields were used as allotments to increase food production. In 1939, Liverpool Parks and Gardens Committee approved a proposal for 5,000 allotment sites over certain parks and recreation grounds. Parks included were Bowring, Sefton, Newsham and Springfield Parks, and in 1940 a sports field was acquired in Coppelhouse Lane for Zackerley for use as allotments. In addition, petrol rationing and attempts by the government to limit civilian use of public transport for leisure in order to prioritise war-related traffic made travelling more difficult during the war. In spite of this, day trips continued throughout the period. Despite the government's concern around the transport network, it also recognised the importance of ensuring that war workers had a break. For example, in 1942, R.S. Hudson, Minister of Agriculture, stated that, in the interests of production, workers should obtain the maximum benefit from the short holidays they will have at home, and it is important that ample facilities for outdoor recreation should be available within easy reach of industrial towns. In 1941, the local press reported that, although there would be no bank holidays that year, there would be staggered holidays. They noted, "Men cannot be worked like the machines, and the government is anxious that every worker shall have an opportunity for rest and recuperation." One way in which local men engaged with open spaces at this time was through the government's Holidays at Home scheme, which began in 1941. In this scheme, local authorities ensured that activities and events were available locally. It was hoped that these offerings would reduce leisure travel and free up the transport network for war-related traffic. These events often took place in local parks and green spaces. In August 1941, for example, the Royal Dutch Band, made up of members of the Netherlands Army, played concerts as part of the Holidays at Home programme. These concerts took place at Walton Hall, Sefton, Stanley and Newsham Parks. The success of the scheme meant that in December 1942, Liverpool Parks and Gardens Committee were already planning the following year's events, including planned concert parties and Shakespearean plays at Walton Hall, Sefton Park and Newsham Park. These schemes continued across Merseyside throughout the war years. However, despite the activities laid on locally, day trips to other areas continued. Easter 1940 saw huge numbers travel from Merseyside to areas including North Wales, Wirral and Southport. Travel was via ferries, public transport and cycling. In August 1941, there were large queues at Merseyside train and bus stations reminiscent of those in peacetime. Many men, lucky enough to have some time off, sought to travel to seaside resorts and country areas for some leisure and recreation. In addition to those travelling by public transport, many chose to hike or bicycle to nearby beauty spots, and Southport and Wirral were popular destinations for these. Given the stresses and strains of their local environment, which had experienced significant bombing, especially during the May Blitz of 1941, it is unsurprising that local men wanted to escape for a while to less stressful environments. As one local paper wrote, thousands of workers have lived the last year in bombed and blitzed areas. Scorched and shattered buildings have provided their main vista. Dust and debris have strewn their path. It has been of tonic effect for these workers merely to get away for a brief spell to places that have none of these trials, places that belong to the world of peace and security and sanity. This highlights how natural spaces were sought out in order to help cope with the anxieties of wartime. Leisure activities were not just taken in the urban environment, there was a desire for the qualities of the natural environment. This talk gives an insight into the importance of the natural environment to Merseyside men during the Second World War and how it helped them to maintain their resilience in this stressful period.